We have another, last two digits are 57.
Tanya, really?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yep, Tanya, first name Tanya, Tanya.
Thank you, Tanya.
Last name really, yep.
Really? R-E-A-L-Y?
No, Riehle.
It depends on what topic.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Does it depend upon it?
Well,
I have to tell you the topic?
yes. It's going to be germane to the
Oh, of course, it would be a jury. Calling user 7155, last two digits are 72.
you want to discuss when the topic comes up, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Being 4 o'clock, we'll call the Marathon County Executive Committee to order, please. We will start with item number 2, public comment, not to exceed 15 minutes. We do have 3 individuals who have registered and requested to address the Executive Committee. We have Tina Jensen, we have Rachel Butella, and we have Supervisor Jean Mask. And so I will start with Ms. Jensen. You have the floor.
Thank you, Supervisors. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to give a really great shout out to all the farmers this month. We were able to go to one of the June Dairy Month farm breakfasts. It was absolutely amazing. There is so much hard work being done this month. It's so hot. It's amazing how much food gets made in Marathon County and that goes back into the county, that helps feed the county. So I was just very excited that the county is just appreciative of all the stuff that goes into these farming communities. The farmers markets in town are such a great aspect to our community, and the CSAs from Stony Acres and Cattails, all those different places that are helping to feed our community. And I just remember people like George Washington Carver, just celebrating him this month, all the amazing inventions that he did to help farming. So we just live in a beautiful farming community, and I know there's been district supervisors that have been farmers while working hard on the board, and I just want to say thank you to those as well. And I'm just really appreciative. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Next, we have Rachel Butella. Rachel, you have the floor.
District Supervisors, I wanted to take a chance to read from the Bill of Rights, Amendment 1, Freedom of Expression. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. I also wanted to read part of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I was able to attend the education meeting with Kevin McGarry, and I just wanted to thank the supervisors and everyone that was able to attend. It brought clarity for me. It strengthened my understanding of some of the roots that were established back in 1776. So I just felt a refresher of information, but I also felt so thankful that they were here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, last but not least, Supervisor Mask. Supervisor Mask, you're recognized for the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm the representative for the county board on the Partnership for Progressive Agriculture. And we had our June dairy breakfast this last Sunday at Swiderski Equipment in Mosinee. And we served approximately 2,000 people. It was a beautiful day for a breakfast. I didn't get to see anybody coming in because I wasn't in the serving line, so I don't know if any of you were there. But I wanted to say that we had a representative from the health department there, and she was thrilled with the way everything was handled, and we passed all the health codes with flying colors. And for any of you who did come, I'm glad you did. We had a great time, a great turnout. It was a beautiful venue for the first time to have this after COVID and all the being shut in, and offered a lot of space and a lot of a good time. It was a very good breakfast and it was very successful. So I just wanted to let the executive committee know that, because Marathon County sponsors PPA so far until we are done next year. Thank you.
Thank you. And with not being anybody else registered, we will move on to item number 3, approval of the May 13th, 2021 Executive Committee meeting minutes. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Langenhan. Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair McEwen. I did have a email from an individual that expressed concern that individuals that were identified in the minutes that publicly addressed the committee last month, their address was not included in those minutes. They did provide, the one individual did provide their address, and it was omitted from the minutes, so that will be updated and included in there. And so is there any other discussion on the minutes as corrected? Any other discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the May 13th, 2021 Executive Committee meeting minutes. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. And we will move on to policy issue discussion and possible action. Item 4A, county board meetings to be held in person. I have placed this back on the agenda at the request of the supervisors to have a discussion about whether or not we return to in-person meetings and a possible potential a requirement, if that were the direction, that would require a rule change under our rules. So the one thing that I would highlight is that at this point in time, anybody that wishes to receive a vaccine or vaccination from the vaccines has had probably plenty of opportunity to do that. The site that we have that partners at the NTC no longer requires a a scheduled appointment. They're accepting walk-ins. My wife last Friday had her second shot and was just a walk-in. It was originally tentatively scheduled, but they encouraged us to even come in early, and there was no wait time. So I think at least the discussion that we need to have about holding potential in-person meetings is something that's ripe for discussion. Thoughts?
This is Supervisor Guild.
Supervisor Gill, go ahead.
What is the current recommendation as far as spacing in the assembly room? What can everyone, if they wanted to, could everyone come?
Well, the county this last Monday was moved from the moderate to the low current state of transmission of the disease, which allows, the recommendation is to allow to have 50% capacity for gatherings. And so based on a 50% capacity, the room would be allowed to have 50 individuals in it in comparison to the current 25 under the moderate activity level. So,
Okay, so based
if
upon-
that were the case, then we would be able to provide enough spacing for every supervisor to attend in person.
Okay, then another question, how has it been going doing the online access for both supervisors and the public? Is it proving to be a burden that we would want to discontinue that process and go back to how it was, or have we largely adapted after the past year? And I'm asking because I personally would like to see us recommend and encourage in-person meetings, but continue to offer the online or call-in options for those who need it. And so I'm wondering, if we were to go that route, what kind of impact would that have?
Well, there has always been some challenges, I think, with the use of technology. There's certain supervisors that have broadband challenges personally, including myself. And so to attend in person or to attend virtually and be able to utilize video so that you can interact with the individuals is rather challenging in certain supervisors' cases. And I personally believe that there's interaction that is lost when we don't have in-person meetings. But I do understand that there's a convenience factor, and in certain cases, when supervisors are on vacation, they still may be able to attend meetings through virtual. I'm open to any ideas and suggestions by the executive committee with a recommendation to the full board, if any. Vice Chair McEwen.
Supervisor.
Supervisor Pfifferk, you'll be next. Vice Chair McEwen is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the sentiments of Supervisor Gill. I would certainly encourage supervisors to come in person, but I've had some discussions with supervisors that are family members that are susceptible to higher, the infection rate, or they can't get their shots for some reason. But like I said, I would encourage supervisors to come here because I like in-person meetings myself. However, if we would allow 50% in here, if we had the 38 supervisors and the staff members, that would limit the public access to this room, would it not?
It would, but we also have the ability to utilize overflow.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Supervisor Pfifferk is next.
Yes, I would just echo some of the other comments that have already been made. I agree with Supervisor Guild. I agree with the chair. There is a piece that's lost when we're not in-person meeting. There is that aspect lost to it. But once again, this meeting I wouldn't be able to attend in person, but I'm able to participate virtually. And that's very beneficial to be able to keep up with what's going on. So I think there is some balance that needs to be brought on this. And, maybe there's something where we have the voting meeting where we're going through that action. Maybe that's a required in-person meeting in the future, with the other meetings being open to in-person or virtual attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. You brought up a great point. One of the challenges that we continue to have when we have in-person meetings is the challenge of votes, where we have to call out, or the clerk has to read each of the supervisor and request a vote. We can't utilize our voting system, and so that becomes a little bit of a challenge, additional challenge when we continue to have virtual meetings. Other thoughts?
Supervisor Harris.
Supervisor Harris, go ahead.
I would agree largely with a lot of the comments of Supervisor Pfeiffer. The only other option I would probably offer too is maybe the full county board meetings in person, or as Supervisor Pfeiffer said, at least the voting meeting. But then the committee meetings, like today, those still be available for virtual, because then a lot of people that normally can't attend during the day, myself is one sometimes, in between work though, I might can take a lunch break or attend, or other people who live farther away can then attend more of the meetings during the week. And then the county board meetings, which are after work hours, if we want to make a requirement for those, then I think that would probably be a little more doable for people. Thank you.
Supervisor Longhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some thoughts. The only other challenge that I can think of, especially in the last year and a half, that we've had to overcome due to the advent of electronic meetings has been, the compliance with open meetings law. I can actually claim personal responsibility for the cancellation of 2 standing committee meetings because a URL or a telephone code was posted incorrectly. But the fact of the matter is that we've overcome that. Our staff has done a really great job of having a good eye for detail, and that hasn't been an issue since, I think the last one was maybe last summer. So that's something that had been a challenge, but is not a challenge anymore. Excuse me. I myself favor more accessibility overall. I think that giving the opportunity for not only members of our governing body, but also members of the public to attend virtually is good government. I know myself, being fully vaccinated, that there's a certain expectation from my constituents that I should attend all meetings in person. I think that's a decision that each of the county board supervisors will have to make. So again, I would favor more accessibility than lesser accessibility. One other thing I would add is that I think that there's value in maybe saying to the county board members that you can attend in person if you so choose, because up until this past month, I myself was unfamiliar with what the rules were. I didn't know that there was or wasn't a limiting whether or not I could attend a meeting in person. So maybe it would just require a small announcement saying that meetings can be attended in person. There was never a rule limiting the in-person attendance of meetings, even during this past year and a half. So this is something that I think Rules Review Committee should explore when they convene, because ultimately it's going to have to go back to the rules anyway. And some other supervisors have already expressed this afternoon, and it's something that I actually want to have some discussion with, is that, do you require in-person attendance for the voters meeting and not for the educational meeting? I would like to delve more into that idea. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Comments, suggestions? Supervisor Leahy.
I think, as many others, I agree with a whole lot of these points. I understand the necessity to eventually get back to the previous processes. We can't delay it forever, but I do think a compromise at the moment would be wise, and perhaps let people get back into the swing of things, in a better timeline. So I like the idea of perhaps requiring both the educational and voting full board meeting in person. And then committee meetings, encourage vaccinated members who are voting members of those committees to maybe attend in person so that you can all be on the same page. But I do think there is a great value in keeping these things open virtually to other board members and community members. So I guess I would be willing to consider the compromise of making the full board meetings in person, as long as we can, stay spaced out and maybe use that overflow space for those attending.
Go ahead. Mr. Klein, CCIT Director, would like to address the committee.
I was listening in the other room, and I wanted to add something. Supervisor Guild asked the question about, the technical restrictions. And one thing I'd like to suggest is if you wanted to continue to do meetings via WebEx for a couple of months, or maybe pick out specific meetings, one of the things that might make lower the possibility of problems is those that remote in, instead of having them remote in, is the people that need to vote. Instead of having them remote in with a telephone call, have them use require them to use the WebEx app, which there is a phone version of that. So if they were traveling on vacation, they could install the WebEx phone app. The difference is, Kurt, I think you know exactly what this is. We then can control the muting of them, and when people are on telephone calls, and we ask them to mute, they often forget to unmute themselves, or we mute them because they're talking. There's a lot of background noise. And so that might be something to add to the mix as another option, which is to say they have to be using the WebEx app in this next period of time where you're going to make the next transition when. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, thank you. Other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Robinson, go ahead.
I would generally support the discussion that's taken place. My one concern is the educational meeting. We have in the past tended to have a significant number of people that have wanted to test or provide comments, which may make it difficult to honor the 50-person limitation. So we may want to consider starting out with the voting meeting being mandatory, but allow for, I don't know, there's a provision under extenuating circumstances in the approval of the chair to participate remotely, should there be an extenuating circumstance. Just a thought.
Any other discussion? Any recommendations? Is there a recommendation that we want to move forward to the full board for its consideration? Currently understanding that our current rules allow WebEx by each and every supervisor for any committee and or full board meetings right now currently. So if we were going to make a recommendation or a recommendation to the full board, it would require a rules change. If we were going to require in-person for voting, it would require a rule change and would require a 2/3 majority vote of the board.
Chair, Supervisor Pfeiffer, I'd like to make a motion.
Supervisor Pfeiffer, go ahead, make a motion.
Yeah, I'd make a motion that we amend the rules starting in the month of July, that attendance at the voting meeting of a county board be required in person and remain status quo with virtual meetings for the others.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion on the motion? Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that for the work that we do here, I think that motion maybe requires a little bit more clarity and explanation as far as when the supervisor in his motion said that, as well as others, am I to interpret that as meaning all our standing committees, our program committees? I think we need to provide a little, I think we need a little bit more clarity there.
Supervisor Pfeiffer.
Go ahead, Supervisor Pfeiffer.
I guess to clarify my motion, what I'm intending is that voting meeting that typically occurs on the Tuesday would be required in person. All other meetings, the educational meeting of the county board and all committee meetings you would be allowed to attend virtually.
Does that provide enough clarity? The question, the one question that I would ask is are we going to allow the public to attend virtually at the voters meeting? So if I hear your motion correctly, that it's only in person. So I just want to clarify if we were to continue to use WebEx for the general public.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
this is Supervisor Robinson. In light of the fact that we've gone with public access, I don't know what the limitations are in the rural areas, but we do allow them to view our county board meetings remotely through public access, and that's live stream. So some of those concerns could be negated, and typically we do not allow the public to comment at the voting meeting, but rather provide the opportunity for public participation at the educational meeting.
The other thing I think that it does is it does eliminate one of the technical challenges that we have if we're going to require in-person for the voters meeting, understanding the mic situation. If we're going to continue to allow WebEx is a real challenge with feedback because we have limited number of mics. The portable mics do create a technical challenge sometimes for the board, where if we did not allow WebEx for that voter meeting, again, I think we've eliminated that potential challenge. Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second to require in-person meeting attendance by the supervisors for the voters meeting, the normal voters meeting. And I'm assuming that infers that we would not allow WebEx for the public on the voters meeting. Supervisor Langenhahn.
Chair, this is Supervisor Pfeiffer.
Supervisor Pfeiffer, go ahead.
Just tie the bow on that motion. Yes, that would be my intent, is that we do not have WebEx availability for that voting meeting. It is streamed live so people can watch, but at that point, there really is no public input opportunities at that voting meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion? Supervisor Langenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the motion in theory. In practice, I think there's an inconsistency here. If you say, and I understand that there's an opportunity for individuals in the public to view the meetings, in this case, the Tuesday meetings, without WebEx. But I don't like the inconsistency between that Thursday meeting and the Tuesday meeting. I would almost rather see that the Tuesday meeting still be accessible to members of the public, even if we weren't going to take public comment through WebEx on that Tuesday meeting. I just don't like the idea that on Thursday we would have the WebEx URL posted on the meeting notice, and then on Thursday you would have the WebEx URL on the meeting notice, and then on Tuesday you wouldn't have it. that inconsistency just, that's not a firm enough basis for me. Others it might be. I myself, I don't necessarily like the motion how it is right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, a question for, well, just I'd like to point out that we could put the public access link on our minutes or on the agenda, allowing people to access it that way. And that may address Supervisor Lonenheim's concerns.
That would be just an administrative function, so absolutely, we could have those on the agenda. Supervisor Longenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Supervisor Robinson. That does clear up some concerns. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? So the motion is to return to full in-person in the voters' meeting starting July, and that would be a recommendation to the full board for its discussion and vote. And again, it would require a rules change, which would require a 2/3 majority vote of the board. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Motion is carried. We will forward that recommendation to the full board. Moving on, broadband update. Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just bring the executive committee up to date on what's happening. As many of you know, Wittenberg Tell received a Public Service Commission grant for expanding fiber to the premise in the Ringgold area earlier this spring, and they are hopefully going to do that in the near future. Unfortunately, it only serves 80 plus homes and businesses. The Federal Communication Commission is in the process of awarding contracts to CCO Charter Communication and LTD, a wireless broadband firm out of Minnesota, to provide gigabyte services for significant portions of the county in the northern tier and western parts of the county. The Wisconsin Public Service Commission just recently announced another cycle of grants with $100 million of federal funding available through the state. That would have a requirement of 100 megabytes up and down, with, if that's not available, 100 down, 20 up, but scalable to 100. We have, as a county, currently $177,000 remaining in our capital improvement plan, as well as one of the eligible activities under the American Rescue Plan is investments in infrastructure, specifically broadband. The Finance Committee authorized a public engagement process where we'll be going out to the towns, joint meeting of the Towns Association, as well as informational meetings in Hatley, Edgar, and Wausau to get public input on how we'll spend those monies. But I anticipate that we'll hear about the potential needs for broadband in there. In addition, on next Monday, we are having a meeting coordinated through the Broadband Task Force with the internet service providers to talk about how we will partner with them relative to the next rounds of the Public Service Commission grant. We've also been continuing meetings with other internet service providers who have floated a number of ideas, and based upon some of those discussions, the Broadband Task Force later this month will be considering an approach similar to what Kewaunee County took. Kewaunee County went out for proposals and requested internet service providers provide them with proposals on how they would best serve the unserved portions of the county. We've tried partnering with internet service providers. We've hired Design 9 to do a study on what our needs are, and we haven't significantly expanded internet service opportunities in the county to date, and Kewaunee County had great success. So we're going to be looking at the potential for developing that request for proposals to come in and then selecting a vendor who we would work with in coordinating other grant activities and expansion. There are opportunities for multiple vendors to participate in that process, but we wanted to bring you up to date that, number one, we will be looking at participating in the next round of the Public Service Commission grants as a partner with other internet service providers who meet our goals. And then we will also be looking at a broader approach to requesting proposals for how do we serve the county, and we'll be developing criteria in which to evaluate those proposals. So are there any questions or anything? Jerry or Kurt? Kurt, you've been involved. Randy, you've been involved. And Sarah, you've been tracking some of those meetings. Anything you'd like to add?
Anything anybody would like to add? I think you did a good job of covering where we're at this point, but I think we are, seriously, as the task force continues to look, potentially looking at going out to RFP to actually start to have some actual true impact on delivery of broadband and broadband expansion in this county. Okay, next we have item number 4C, education presentation speaker policy. And I put this on at the request of several members of the board. And so I bring it back to the executive committee for a recommendation as to what criteria you want to utilize and or, how do you want to require or request when somebody requests to have an education presentation to this board. Supervisor Langenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for placing this item on the agenda for discussion today. I myself don't at this time have much to add in the place of what sort of criteria we would be looking for when putting together this type of policy together. One thing I would like to advocate for, however, is that this task be given to the Rules Review Committee to review. I think that they're the ones that could give this enough time and enough, I hate to keep saying review, but that's a really well-named committee, isn't it? The Rules Review Committee. I think that we should still take input from all the county board supervisors as well as members of the public, but again, that can be done at Rules Review and not necessarily task the executive committee with creating that policy for the entire board, which, I mean, the board approves the rules anyway. So I think we start at Rules Review and we continue on up. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I was concerned when I heard that talk. I believe in separation of church and state, and I don't think that we should be proselytized or, told about religious thought, whether it's Christian or whatever. I don't think that a government body should be encouraging this type of discussion. And I had questions about what God allows us to have for free, what we're being given and what we must work for. I had problems with that type of teaching, education, and I don't think it should fit into a government discussion. I do believe in the separation of church and state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Robinson, and then who was it? Supervisor Harris next. Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you.
I think it's important we establish criteria, but one of the other things that I think I would like to see in that speaker policy is that there be an ability for questions and answers. I too was somewhat taken aback by some of the comments that were made. And I know that in an earlier presentation, other members of the county board would have liked to have asked questions. I think if we're going to bring someone in, that we as a board ought to have the right to ask them questions relative to their presentation.
Okay. Supervisor Harris is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I would also agree with Supervisor Robinson on asking questions, but I think also in terms of the speaker policy, we should ask that the speaker's presentation not be inconsistent with our stated policies, missions, or core values. Also at a basic level, that they use clean language and be courteous and respectful when speaking, as all supervisors are required to do so. And that if they're speaking on a topic, because as the county board, just like when we were dealing with COVID, we ask that the public put their trust in the information that we provide them. So at a minimum, a speaker, because otherwise anybody can give a public comment and say whatever they want to. But if we're putting someone up there and we're saying that they are a speaker and providing information from the county, I would expect that they would need to have education, training, or experience in the given topic for which they're chosen to speak on. That before they speak on a given night, that they do present what their presentation is going to be ahead of time. As normally we do have to post, our presentations in terms of for the agenda, and I don't know if we want an approval process for that, and that and again going with making sure that the person is somewhat qualified to speak on that topic. That they do provide, as we have for volunteer committee positions at a basic level, their resume in terms of their credentials. But they have to follow core values. Anyone's going to speak that. And then the other thing is, right now I've noticed that Marathon County, whenever we have a speaker, we don't say anything to the effect of the speaker's comments or their beliefs are their own and not representative of the county. So, for instance, if you had someone up there and they were defaming people, and there are different laws, but let's say it's a private individual, another citizen that gave maybe public comment or something, and they defamed that person, and the county is essentially endorsing, not making a statement about this speaker or whatever they say doesn't necessarily represent the county. Then I feel the county could open itself up for possible litigation on defamation issues. If the county is presenting that person as truthful and representing the county without any other further statements. So I think for all those reasons, it's definitely important that we have a speaker policy, and it's not to ruin anybody's free speech, but we do, I think, expect more from the speakers we put up there rather than the speakers that just give public comment, because that's what public comment is for. 2 minutes, you say whatever you want to. You're not required to have anything, but a actual educational presentation is to provide education to the public, and we need to make sure that education is something that the public can trust, since it's coming from the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What's kind of amazing to me is the first presentation that we had, I kept my personal comments to myself about that. Nothing was said. We get another speaker in that's totally on the opposite side, and now there's a problem. So I think we definitely need to have a criteria, but the problem is going to be who's going to develop that criteria. It's going to be the county board. But to split it right down the middle is going to be really hard to do. So, if it was up to me, it'd be better off not to have any public speakers. That is not going to offend somebody, because you're not going to be able to do that. Somebody's going to be offended on one side or the other. And so, like I said, it's just strange that we had criticism from the second speaker, but nothing on the first speaker. And that's not going to work. That's just going to continue to antagonize the board. So, thank you.
I got Supervisor Longenhan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that in regards to the recent comments, I would just say that the county board has the ability to recognize any member of the public to speak on something. So I think that saying that there is a risk to having somebody speak in front of the county board, I understand that, but I think that that risk has always been with this body. Because if we were going to demand a resume and a background check out of everybody that came to speak in public comment, that would be impossible. And also, I don't philosophically agree with it. But here's my other concern. As I said last month at the executive committee meeting, I do not want this board to become a classroom. I do not want anybody to be able to just come in here and direct the county board like we were back in elementary or middle school. I think that opens up a Pandora's box of possibilities. I value input from the public, let me clarify and say that, but I don't want our agendas to suddenly become dominated by educational presentations. That's not why we're here. We're here to do the people's business. So I would echo back to what I said earlier, that I think we at least owe it to ourselves to try and craft some policy to create some criteria for the speakers that come in here. And this is a problem that I would agree with Supervisor McEwen that, you know, we had that presentation last year and we just had another presentation. I would just say that now it's become a priority for the county board to address. And if we choose to do so and address it, that's within our ability. Thank you.
Okay, we have Supervisor Butke is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do agree with Supervisor Langenhan's initial comments that we do need to go to rules review for this. I think that's the perfect place to address this. And I think that Supervisor Harris was spot on as far as developing a policy and specifically some type of vetting process that would be allowed to go forward. And I think rules review is exactly the place for that to go forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I believe that both speakers had valuable information to give. I don't see it as totally a contrast or opposing. I thought both of them gave history, Black history, and I think it's important to be educated on that because many patterns, ideas, and behaviors follow through from generation to generation about attitudes towards particular races and so on. And it's certainly become an issue present day. I don't think it's something we should block out, forget, deny. And I felt that both of them gave some valuable information on the history of Black people. I did in college study, which was in 1969 and 1970, I did study Black history and culture. Excuse me, not Black history, but Black music and culture. So that was a little bit about that. And then I did teach in integration and during desegregation, or segregation and desegregation. I didn't really know much. I knew something about Black history, but I thought the two speakers certainly educated us, and I don't see anything wrong with that. Thank you.
Supervisor Langenhan.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we forward this matter to the Rules Review Committee for their body of work for the upcoming term. With the addition that all the comments gathered from the meeting today be included in the packet for the first committee meeting of Rules Review, where they review the speaker policy. Thank you.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Butke. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Dickinson.
Supervisor Dickinson, go ahead.
The only thing I was going to state is I just wanted to agree with Supervisor Harris that anyone who does present should have those materials ahead of time so that we can all see them before they're presented. Thank you.
Okay. All right, the motion is to refer the education presentations speakers policy to rules review along with the comments made here. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, thank you. We are down to item 4D, Forestry Department requesting a letter of support to reopen the Verso paper mill in Wisconsin Rapids. We got the Parks Director, Jamie Polly on. Jamie?
Jamie, are you there?
Yep, I was muted, sorry.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am on today. Tom Loveland is the one who brought this forward to us. He's on vacation this week, but this is something that just came about, that there is the Assembly Bill 3667 going forward for potentially having the state give a loan of $50 million to Consolidated Cooperative to help purchase the Verso mill, which would put it back into timber production. This is a loan that they are putting forward, not a payment, not a grant of any sort. So it is expected to be paid back. But where Tom is coming from and bringing this forward is this is something supported by the Wisconsin County Forest Association, in which we are a member and we are a certified forest. We did take some of our lumber from our timber sales to the Verso mill. About 30% of our pulpwood went there, which was about 25% of our annual timber volume. So we do now need to find alternate sources to take that to without that mill being open. So as a source of where we can take our wood to and gain revenue from, and this being a loan, he is presenting this to the county board for possible support letter of this to be able to get that mill back open.
Okay, questions? I guess the only, the details, devil's in the details. If we're going to provide a $50 million loan, what's going to secure that loan? The challenges I see in the industry is in a free market system. We had the state of Wisconsin provided some economic impact and economic assistance to reopen the Park Falls mill not that long ago, and yet that has reclosed. And just within the last 2 weeks, the Neenah paper mill has announced its closure. June 1 of 2021, it announced its closure, and it will be closed by the end of July. So I bring it up for discussion so that we have full disclosure. In a free market system, the challenges of that industry from a worldwide perspective is challenging. So do we support providing assembly? I guess I'm going to ask. Was that Assembly Bill 367? 367. Okay, Assembly Bill 367. Thoughts by the committee?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Supervisor Robinson. I'm concerned about us taking a stand in support of this. Clearly, there are challenges to the paper industry, and those challenges don't go away with this loan. And we've saw the closing of the Wausau Papers mill in Brokaw, and that happened. We've seen the announcement in the Fox Valley. There have been several other announcements. My concern over the legislation is I have several concerns over it. One, there are no parameters or guarantees associated with it. Two, it deals with the American Recovery Plan Act dollars and directs the governor to take action. I think that more than likely would be vetoed. Three, there are provisions through the Wisconsin Economic Development Authority to provide financial assistance to businesses, including mills, that have a viable business plan. And I understand the potential ramifications on us, but what we need to do is begin to look at what other industries can we attract into the area, given the fact that we have surplus forest products that may create markets. Is there an opportunity for Louisiana Pacific or LP to expand their wood business? And I just very concerned about taking a stand on something without knowing what the details are, the guarantees are. Marathon County is going more and more paperless. I think the writing's on the wall that it's an industry that's struggling with imports and decreased demand. So I can't support it at this time.
Other discussion? Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At last month's workforce development meeting, there was a report from Wood County that there was a consortium that was attempting to buy the mill and reopen it. I don't know if that has anything to do with this bill or not, and they didn't go into detail as far as who the consortium was. So, thank you.
Jamie, do you know who that bill advances the loan to? Is it to that consortium?
It is, yes.
It is, okay.
That's the consolidated cooperative.
Okay, all right. Other discussion?
This is Supervisor Guild.
Supervisor Gill, go ahead.
I have a question for Jamie. The one thing that did get my attention in the proposed letter is of course, the impact of the mill's closure on our county. And you said about 10% of our wood was going to this mill. Have we found alternatives to processing our mill, or our wood, sorry? Do we have other avenues, or is this particular mill really that crucial to Marathon County's, bottom line, to who we can be working with?
I think.
Sure, thank you, sir.
Yeah, Sarah, I think first off, I think Ms. Polly indicated it's 30% of our wood products that is from our forest is actually sold to Verso. But Jamie, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair and Supervisor Guild. That's a great question, and I think that's one of the biggest concerns among the county forests in the state is, as all of these mills close, that is putting more and more pressure on the mills that are open. So that drives the demand down because we all need to get rid of that wood, and also then drives the price down, the price per cord that we get. So that does mean reduced revenue for our county going forward if we don't have these mills to take our wood to, and if there's too much wood to go to just a few mills. This is one that is in our area that we do take our wood to, so it does affect us. I don't know, I haven't been able to talk to Tom about how maybe Neenah might affect us, but as each one closes, it affects the market more and more. And we don't really know what the effect of this one is quite yet, since it just closed last year. We're just getting through this season of timber sales, and we have a lot over the winter. So far, we have been able to get rid of our wood or sell our wood, but we don't know quite what the lasting impacts will be. As more and more of this happens and the industry changes, we still have our forests to manage, and that is a very large revenue source for not only our county, but even other counties who really, really rely on their timber sales.
Okay, other discussion? Other discussion? Any recommendations? Okay, unfortunately, with no recommendations and no motions, I will look for any other motions or motions in support or motions opposed, or no motion at all.
This is Supervisor Guild. I'm willing to make a motion to approve moving that letter forward. It sounds like this mill does have an impact on our county and on our funding source, so I am comfortable making that motion.
Okay, there's a motion to support the letter of support to Assembly Bill 367 to assist in the reopening of the Verso paper mill in Wisconsin Rapids. Is there a second?
Pfeiffer, second.
We have a second with Supervisor Pfeiffer. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we met last week, and I don't know why, but I can't recall this detail, and I'm hoping Director Polly can help me. Jamie, did this letter go through the Environmental Resources Committee?
No, it did not, because we were just made aware of it on Tuesday, June 1st, the day of the meeting. So it was not able to get onto the mill. And Tom put this together, asking for this to be on the agenda on June 2nd, Wednesday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Administrator Leonard has some additional comment.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I just want to build on what Jamie just referenced with, in response to the question from Supervisor Langenhan. You know, this was made aware to us in the time frame that Jamie referenced, and this is similar to the issue that you may recall being addressed with public safety and the Department of Justice reaching out to staff to advocate, to ask that staff submit letters of support relative to funding. I viewed this in largely the same way. Tom and Jamie brought it to my attention as soon as they learned of it. This is really, in my mind, an opportunity for the board to express what its priorities are within the state budget. It's not a position, it's not really, in my mind, appropriate for staff to weigh in on issues of what are Marathon County's priorities. You as the board, that's really your role. So that's why it's before you today. The County Foresters Association, for all the reasons Jamie said, you know, this is important. It's important for county foresters, it's important for Marathon County, and it's really important for a lot of other counties that rely heavily upon that revenue. That said, it's in my judgment, this is an area within the purview of the board. So the only suggestion or clarification I would like referenced is that the letter is written as Marathon County supporting this bill, simply clarifying that if this does pass, that the county board chair, as opposed to staff, would be requested to sign that letter. That's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Pfeiffer?
Supervisor Boots.
Excuse me, Supervisor Boots, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I actually lost, my call dropped here for about 5 minutes. What did I miss? I guess, are we voting on this right now, or what's the?
There's a motion to, in support of signing a letter on behalf of the board in support of Assembly Bill 367, which would provide an additional $50 million to the consortium to help potentially restart and reopen the Verso mill in Wisconsin Rapids. So that's
and who made the motion? Seconded it?
So Supervisor Guild made the motion and Supervisor Pfeiffer made the second.
Okay, thank you.
There has been some discussion and the discussion about the challenges with the paper mill industry or the paper industry, noting that in just the last 2 weeks, another paper mill in the state of Wisconsin has noted and noticed that they're going to be closing by the end of July, that being the Neenah paper mill, and that also has potentially 300 employees that are being affected by that mill. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is again Supervisor Robinson.
Supervisor Robinson, and then we'll have Supervisor Butke next.
This is, not a budget amendment. It's a freestanding bill, and it's again directing the allocation of the federal dollars, which is a gubernatorial prerogative. So at best, it is a request, and we have other mechanisms in place through the Wisconsin Economic Development Authority to provide funding. But most importantly, there needs to be underwriting criteria that is put in place before we get behind plans in an industry that is being challenged. And as much as we'd like to keep the jobs and have a market for our forest products, we need to be prudent and use due diligence in our approach to these items. And I would not oppose funding through the Wisconsin Economic Development Authority or some other mechanism if indeed there's a viable business plan. But the Park Falls mill struggled and struggled and struggled. The Brokaw mill shut down. The Neenah mill is being shut down. It is an industry under duress, and you can throw money at it to delay the inevitable. We need to begin to look at other markets for forest products to be successful, or a significant change in our import regulations relative to paper that's made elsewhere. But under the present scenario, we're probably doing nothing more than delaying the inevitable of the plant closing.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Butke is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be voting in favor of this letter. I do it with a bit of reservation, though, because it just feels like a bit of pandering. I think Supervisor Robinson's comments unfortunately are correct in a lot of ways, that is where the paper industry is headed. However, that plant in Wisconsin Rapids means an awful lot to a lot of our people here in Marathon County and Northwoods as a resource to deliver their product. I know directly from the banking industry, a lot of our loggers and so forth use that mill extensively, and it's important to them. And it means jobs to our area, so that is why I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. It is, I was just thinking, it's possible that the paper industry may be coming back because there is such a strong worldwide push for getting rid of plastic bags everywhere. The oceans are flooded with them. The garbage disposals get caught with them, and there's a huge push against plastic wrappers, plastic bags, one-use plastic which is thrown away. So they're trying to use reusable products now, and much more environmentally friendly, I would think, would be our paper products. So many nonprofit organizations are pushing on the U.S. level, the federal level, to do away with these fossil fuel plastic products. So I'm thinking not to lose hope, and I think that we have a very good resource in wood in our forestry, and that I don't think it's going to, it might be sinking now, but I'm thinking it's going to come back. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll keep my comments. I too have seen the challenges, or see the challenges in the paper industry. I mean, we have seen, historically across the state was, founded in timber and paper products, but I think there's additional opportunities for the use of those wood products, whether that be a chipboard. We see the demands for We see the demands for building materials and the short supply that we have here. I don't know that we see the demand and the economic benefit or the economic business model that is going to allow for the paper industry to continue at its current at the current scale that we're at. You know, we're again the Park Falls mill. We added significant amount of tax dollars in support of reopening that when that closed, and yet it's reclosed again. We see the Broco mill. The Broco mill is closed. We now, again, within the last 2 weeks, seen the Neenah mill. We also seen the mill in Port Edwards close. So I think I can't support, even though I do understand that it has a direct impact on potential sale of wood products of Marathon County's forestry, and a number of individuals that produce you know, wood products and businesses that are supported because of it. However, I can't support this without having some more information. Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, I would just like to add, going back and forth in the discussions that have taken place this afternoon around this particular issue, something that just helped me make a decision here, and it's something that might help the rest of the committee members that are in conflict right now with whether or not to vote in favor or against. I just want to highlight something that Administrator Leonard had said earlier. Not that he was advocating for or against any initiative, but just saying that this is where we get to make the decision of where things lie in Marathon County's priorities that are in the state budget. And expressing support for this item would also, in my mind, add it to that other list in competition with the items that are on that other list. And not that I don't value the value of, or not that I don't value that a person has a good job at a paper mill, but I do believe that there are other programs on that list that we've spent a lot of time discussing that are a higher priority. So with that being said, that will be my basis of why I will not be supporting the letter. Again, not that I don't think that there's good value in it. It's just that I think that we as a county have to be very selective about the priorities that we decide to take up. And I just don't see this falling into the list and deserving any more support than any of the other items on that list. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Supervisor Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There has been a lot of interest and discussion in this, and it obviously is important and you know, means a lot to this community and really the entire central Northwoods, Wisconsin area. It's very likely, as Supervisor Robinson suggested, that this bill will be revised, could be vetoed, could be brought back. You know, they might find different funding mechanisms instead of what they're currently proposing. So I'm just wondering if this, you know, it sounds like there are some of us in the room and possibly on the full board that would like to support this idea of supporting a cooperative, you know, to buy back the mill and get it running again, but perhaps just with different terms or more clarified terms. So I'm just wondering if the Forestry Department, Parks Department, you know, will we be able to get more updates on it? Can this be a continuing topic that if major changes happen with the current language of the bill, could this committee even discuss it again? Because it does sound like something that the full board might be willing to support with more clarification. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? So the motion now is to support authorizing the chair to sign on behalf of the Forestry Department the support of AB 367. And I think there's enough that I'd want clarity on the vote, so I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please. Is there any further discussion first? Okay, seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to call the roll. Thanks.
Gibbs,
No.
McEwen,
Yes.
Boots,
Yes.
Bootke,
Yes.
Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Guild,
Yes.
Langenhan,
No.
Leahy, Robinson.
Supervisor Robinson? You're on mute?
No.
And the motion carries. The motion is 5-4. The motion in favor to support. Moving on, operational requirements by statute, ordinance, or resolution. Redistricting committee and appointing the resolution, or appointment resolution. Talk about a couple of things here. First off, currently there is legislation, Senate Bill 385 and Assembly Bill 369 that has been moved forward at the legislature. And what it does is it will delay redistricting in the county supervisory districts and also the local municipality districts to redistrict after the census, but what that means is those districts, the county supervisory districts will be in place for the 2022 election if these bills are passed and signed by the governor. Currently, the challenge is that the census data that is required to actually have in hand to be able to develop those districts under statute normally is in Marathon County's hands by this time. The Census Bureau, and because of COVID, has already identified that they may not get that information out until September 20th of 2021. The process that is required to do redistricting is effectively a 60-60-60 process, 60 days, 60 days, 60 day. First, the county board develops a tentative map. That tentative map then, along with, is forwarded to the municipalities to look at those districts, provide their feedback. That is forwarded back to the board. Then there's public hearings, all of which effectively takes roughly 180 days. In order to actually, if the census data is not received until September 20th, the ability to have the full processes along with having community input, municipality input, public hearings that are required by statute, makes it almost impossible to try to get that time frame in if the data is not received until after September 20th. So what this bill does is it delays the redistricting to 2022, and the redistricting happens. However, the election that is going to take place in February, which is the primary potential, and the general election in April would use the current districts. Now, there has been some misinformation, and that misinformation is that by delaying the Senate Bill 385 and Assembly Bill 369 has an impact on the federal and state redistricting process. It does not. It has no impact on that. And so it only has an impact on the local county board elections and local municipalities elections as far as their districts. Again, understanding why redistricting happens. Redistricting happens so that you have the one vote, one person correlation with representation. So there was, that bill was, had a hearing on, one of the bills had a hearing on yesterday, and there was some misinformation that was presented, at least in the Wheeler report, that the WCA Clerks Association opposed Senate Bill 385 and 369. There is a report or is a statement from the Wisconsin County Clerks Association saying that the individual that did testify and state that he was representing the Wisconsin County Clerks Association is inaccurate, and they are gathering the information from all of the clerks, and the data that they have currently is that 34 of the 48 respondents are in favor of Senate Bill 385 and Assembly Bill 369. 2 are opposed, 8 are neutral, and 4 abstained out of those. So I just wanted to make that clear, but the reason we would still appoint, as we did in the last redistricting, the executive committee was appointed as the redistricting committee, and so that's what this would do. It doesn't prevent us from starting our work. We've already had the County Board Size Task Force provide its input as to the recommendations as far as what this board size should be moving forward. But appointing the redistricting committee now just allows that when that census information is received, that committee, this committee, can start its work on doing the redistricting, even though knowing that if the Senate Bill 385 and Assembly 369 is passed and signed by the governor, the actual implementation date and the utilization date of those new districts would not be effective until the 2024 election. Questions? Supervisor Langenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in light of what you had just said, I would move that we appoint the executive committee as the redistricting committee.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? Supervisor Leahy.
So just to clarify, because there is a vacant seat on the executive committee, will that just be the person who's appointed to the executive committee will automatically be?
Yeah, our board rules have not addressed a vacancy of an at-large executive committee member. My preference would be that we have an election held by this body to elect the vacancy to the executive committee. We'll get to that vacancy under 5C in a little bit. So there's a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to appoint the executive committee as the redistricting committee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Appointment of the Rules Review Committee. Right now, I've had 5 people express interest, and there is, under our rules, the Rules Review Committee can be up to, with the chair being already identified, we have 6 positions filled. I wanted to throw it out to the rest of the executive committee if there's anybody that has interest. Currently, we have the chair of the Rules Review Committee as Craig McEwen, supervisors that have expressed interest. Supervisor Jacobson, Supervisor Robinson, Supervisor Seafelt, Supervisor Seiler, and Supervisor Schley. And there is additional room for one additional member if there's any interest on the executive committee. Supervisor Langenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a past member of Rules Review, I myself would like to express interest in serving on that committee.
Okay. Any others? Okay, so I would move, we will move to the full board for its consideration, the slate of individuals for the board's approval to be the Rules Review Committee appointments. Again, the appointments would be the vice chair as the chair, Craig McEwen, and then Supervisors Jacobson, Robinson, Seafelt, Seiler, Schley, and Langenhahn as members of that committee. And so that was just for information. There's no motion needed because it's the chair's appointments, but the full board will be taking those appointments up. Okay, on to item number 5C, discuss options for filling District 17 vacancy. I wanted to provide, as everybody may or may not know, one of the supervisors has resigned for personal reasons. So Supervisory District 17 has a vacancy, and the statutes allow for two different options to fill that vacancy. One is to call for a special election, and then the second is per our rules, ordinance 2.01, parent 6, parent L. The rules spell out the process by which the board chair and the vice chair solicit letters of interest and do an interview process and bring forward to the full board for its recommendation and confirmation the filling of that vacancy for the unexpired term. So I throw it out for discussion in talking to the clerk as to if you choose to go to a special election to fill that vacancy would remain vacant until the election in April of 2022, because by operations, there's not a regular vote election to take place between now and then. So we really have one option if this board chooses to, but I wanted to throw it out to the committee for its recommendation. Supervisor Langenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question and then a follow-up. The question being, what sort of direction are you looking for from the executive committee today?
Whether they choose to go under the state statute and call for a special election, which would effectively leave that seat open, or use our board rules and move forward with the board rules, doing a recruitment and interview and a recommendation to the full board for its consideration.
Mr. Chair, with that being said, I would move that we follow the, wait 1 second.
I'll make a second on that.
Well, Mr. Chair, is this an actionable item?
Yes, it is. Operational functions required by state ordinance or resolution.
Okay, then then I move that we follow the process outlined in our rules to appoint an individual to District 17. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Vice Chair McEwen. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to follow the rules and the process outlined by the rules to fill the vacancy for Supervisory District 17, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to item D, 5D, discussion recommendation by the HR Finance Committee to suspend Rule 2.05, Parent 2, for the remainder of 2021. And I would ask that the chair of the HR Finance Committee provide his input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On Tuesday, the HR Finance Committee reviewed where we are with the capital improvement process, and Supervisor Leahy has been working with Chair Gibbs, Supervisor Fisher, to look at an alternative process for addressing our capital improvement needs. I think after the last budget, the HR Finance Committee was very frustrated with the process. We're concerned because we've got a significant carve out for infrastructure and IT related work, rolling stock, and then we actually evaluate then other projects, and that's resulted in the past in our deferring maintenance on facilities such as the library. And we felt that there was a need to get a better handle on how we handle our capital processes. We rely on both county board members and citizen members who are members of the Capital Improvement Committee to go through an evaluation process that doesn't have a lot of meaning at the end of the day and doesn't necessarily reflect what needs to be done. So we are proposing for this year that we suspend the rules as it relates to the role of the Capital Improvement Committee, and instead have the HR Finance and Property Committee assume the responsibility for developing the capital improvement plan as part of the budget. On a longer term basis, I think there are discussions about whether we need whether we have a 1 year or a 5 year plan, how we're going to deal with those issues such as rolling stock and information technology and our own facilities. But I think it was unanimous recommendation from the committee that we suspend that rule for the remainder of this county board session.
Just to add on to that, Supervisor Robinson, I think there also was implied that once the committee that's looking at that process that is being headed up by Supervisor Leahy, that rules review potentially incorporate some of those changes when they take up their work in the merging of some of those responsibilities with the HR Finance Committee. Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that being said, would it be more appropriate then to suspend the rule for the remainder of this term rather than for the end of 2021? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. We are in 2021. Sorry. Time flies. But wouldn't it be more germane to have it until the end of this term rather than 2021? Because then we're getting into, we still have like 4 months into this term yet.
If I could answer that, it effectively does the same thing, because the capital improvement process starts with the committees needing to make recommendations by the end of this month for inclusion in the process. So it does the same thing.
Yeah, I don't believe the CIP committee actually meets after they do some monitoring of some program of some capital projects, but I don't believe that they meet January, February, or March. Supervisor Langenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my only concern. With that being said, I'd move that we suspend Rule 2.05 sub 2 for the remainder of County Board Rule 2.05 sub 2 for the remainder of 2021.
As a recommendation to the full board.
Yes.
And seconded by Supervisor Budke. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to recommend to the full board to suspend the County Board Rule 2.05 Parent 2 for the remainder of 2021, signify by saying aye. 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 Go ahead. Aye. Excuse me. Was there a question? Was there a question? Okay, we'll move on to item number 6. What you have before you is the administrator's work plan and the updates to it. I know we didn't have a lot of time at our last committee meeting for questions to the administrator. It's there for your review. If you have any questions or concerns, by all means, this would be the time to ask them. Supervisor Langenhan.
Mr. Chair, just this may be a point of order, but it might be good for the record to say that the last item did pass.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion did pass and was unanimous to approve the recommendation to the full board to suspend Rule 2.05, Parent 2. Okay, now we're to the administrator's work plan. Again, you have it before you. You have the annotations, understanding that currently we're doing the county is doing a recruitment for a deputy administrator, and with that vacancy happening recently, and so we have a little bit of diminished capacity to address all of the 30-some plus projects that are on the administrator's work plan, but I commend the administrator for the work that he has done diligently on, and the progress on some of the major projects that we have on that work plan. So this would be the opportunity for anybody on the executive committee that has questions on any of the projects. Questions by the committee? Okay. Next meeting date and time and location next meeting is Thursday, July 8th at 4 o'clock. Committee members are asked for any ideas or discussion items to bring them to my attention to be included on the executive committee. Any other announcements? Seeing none, down to number 8. Supervisor Lyon with a motion and Vice Chair McEwen with a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.